Mo, let's start with World Series here. As we are recording this in the early stages of the season, not much movement here in terms of futures, but there is a bit of a shortening of the price of one team you bet here before the start of the season, the Toronto Blue Jays, which you got at plus 1,000, 10-1, as we see here across legal books, anywhere between plus 800 and plus 900. What did you like about the Blue Jays coming into the season?
A lot of things. So definitely the lineup. I mean, I think everyone knows how strong this lineup is. Last year's MVP runner-up, Vlad Guerrero Jr., and didn't get close to a full season, honestly, from George Springer. And with him back in the fold and Teoscar Hernandez really playing much better than I think a lot of people expected last year. And now I think a lot of the projections are kind of buying into him as a very good player. Already hit a dinger this year. So off to a solid start. And then I think there's some dead cat bounce potential from Matt Chapman for sure. I mean, career worst season last year. Can't really get worse than that, I wouldn't think. So any sort of rebound from him, I mean, pretty strong chance this is the best lineup in baseball, I think.
For sure. Hard to argue that they are atop the board in terms of American League contenders. Obviously, the Dodgers are at the very top of the board, anywhere from plus 475 to 5-1. If we're looking at longer shots here, I know I've done this in the past. I did it last year. They weren't a long shot, but 20-1 on the Astros last year, the Brewers as well. So if you get them into the playoffs, you have the option to hedge at that point. Two teams that you like a little bit further down the board here, the Minnesota Twins and the Miami Marlins. Now, as you can see, I'm still scrolling here. We finally find them. The Twins anywhere between 45-1 to 55-1. The Marlins anywhere between 80 and 90-1. You got the Marlins before the start of the season at 82-1. The Twins you locked in at 60-1. So, slightly different prices on the Twins at this point. But tell us let's start with the Twins. First of all, what did you like about them coming in? And would you still be interested at 55-1 at this point?
Yeah, I think it's still fine. So for Toronto, the price has dropped a little bit. I think if you're only getting plus 800, you're starting to get into the territory where I'm a little iffier on that one. I was a little disappointed to only get plus 1,000 after it was, I think it was plus 1,200 a few days before I got to it. Unfortunately, had to drive, I have to set up my drives across to Iowa to get into the legal books. So, it unfortunately had moved down a little bit. And yeah, for Minnesota, honestly, they're built a lot like Toronto. So I didn't really get into it with the Blue Jays, but their big issue last year was their bullpen was atrocious. And that's the kind of thing that you can't really usually like bounce from year to year and say, it's going to carry over either good or bad in a lot of cases. Bullpen performance tends to fluctuate quite a bit because you're just looking at like pretty small sample sizes for most of the pitchers. Like if a pitcher throws 70 innings in the pen, they threw quite a bit, right? So you're looking at a number there where it's like 1/3 of a starting pitcher season, and you can't even take a starting pitcher's full season line as like necessarily meaningful in a lot of cases. So that gives you an idea of just how meaningless a 70 inning sample honestly really is. So it's the type of thing that should kind of normalize closer to the league average. So as far as specifically the Twins go, they didn't quite make the improvement there that I was hoping, I guess, just because they traded away Taylor Rogers, their closer, which was a little disappointing to me. He was their one elite arm in the pen, but they needed a lot of help in the rotation as well. I think they're just kind of a middle class man's version of the White Sox, and the White Sox are just considered like so far ahead of them in the markets, and I'm just not really seeing why. The lineups are comparable, and then I understand like the White Sox have more reliable arms at the top of their rotation in Dylan Cease probably, if he's as good as last year, and definitely Lucas Giolito. But beyond that, it's like pretty iffy. And the Twins are just having a lot of kind of solid average type arms. So if some of these guys overperform and the pen isn't a complete disaster the way it was last year, I just don't see why they should be this far behind the White Sox. And yeah, I think with Correa in the fold, a potential MVP candidate, maybe we can talk about that later.
Definitely.
Just can't really see them being this long of shots. I do like some of their young pitching as well. So Joe Ryan, Bailey Obear, these guys look like decent pitchers to me. So anything they can get out of Dylan Bundy and Chris Archer is going to help. Their rotation is definitely a question mark. Not going to sit here and pretend like it's not. But for 60-1, I think, you're getting compensated for that more so than you probably should be.
Mo, before we move on to the Marlins, I also want to mention that you have bet the Twins at plus 575 to win the division as we record, plus 525 still available at Caesars, 5-1 still widely available. So again, just going back to that point you made that you don't see as big of a gap between the White Sox and the Twins as the market does currently. Again, if we go back to World Series markets here, back down to the Marlins. Now, this one surprised me a little bit because, I obviously recognize the strength of their starting pitching. I love the arms that they have and the youth that they have coming up through their system. But I was wondering if they might still be like a year away. And I know you bet them at 82-1. I wonder I guess I'm just going to ask you outright because the Phillies got all of the hype. The Mets are spending a boatload of money with their new billionaire owner. The Braves are the defending World Series champions. How much of this is about the Marlins? How much of this is about expanded playoffs for you?
Expanded playoffs is big for a team like the Marlins. It's big for a team like the Twins as well. Just helping these teams that are not necessarily expected to win their division, and giving them a shot, really. It's baseball. Just getting in is huge because of the variance inherent to the game, right? We've seen that in the past with teams like the Cardinals. That one year they won it. They weren't necessarily the best team or even all that close, but people get hot at the right time and, variance falls in your favor. All of a sudden you're in the World Series. So I think I would agree with you. It's probably more likely than not that the Marlins are a year away, but they do have a little bit of talent coming up in the lineup that they didn't have last year, like getting a full season from Jesus Sanchez. Joey Wendell was a decent pickup from the Rays. He's been a solid player. Jacob Stallings was one of the better catchers actually last year. They got him from the Pirates. And then, honestly, if everything popped perfectly for Jazz Chisholm, he could be an MVP candidate. So there's definitely some potential. Oh, they picked up Soler too, obviously a monster for the Braves in the playoffs last year. And just a hitter who has previously had some really strong seasons and some not so strong seasons. But when you're getting 82-1, you're just getting a price where you can bake in the chance of a pretty poor season from him and just take the loss, right? Yeah. So yeah, like you said, the starting pitching for sure is tremendous. I had questions about the bullpen for sure, was not a fan of it, but was just hoping for some like regression, dead cat bounce type of deal. But then they scooped up Cole Sulser from the Orioles, which is pretty big. He has one of the better projections for a reliever out there. He was very, very good last year. And Tanner Scott, I think, is a reasonable arm to have in your rotation or your bullpen as well. So the bullpen looks more middle class to me than it did 2 weeks ago.
For sure. In my mind, Mo, when I look at this division, it's interesting to me because I feel like the Phillies have a better chance of making the playoffs with their just incredible lineup. But if they actually get to the playoffs, I think they would struggle because of their pitching and defense. Whereas the Marlins, if they actually get to the playoffs, I think they could be really dangerous with this pitching that they have. So, but you got to get there first, right? When you're doing futures. And, with that being said, you're getting double the price on the Marlins than you are on on the Phillies. So I can't argue with you there in terms of the potential value down the road. The only other team futures market we haven't discussed that you have in your account comes by way of the AL West, and it's not often I see you laying the juice in a baseball futures, but here we are with the Houston Astros. You laid -162 for them to win the AL West, -170, the current best price available as we record right now. What led you to this decision?
Yeah, this one, another one I think is still bettable. So you're right. Not something I do that often, take the chalk, but I think it's warranted in this case. I think the Astros are just quite a bit better than the other teams. In the AL West, I'm pretty down on the AL West in general. I don't love the Mariners or the Angels, and I think Oakland is going to be incredibly awful. I have quite a bit on under 70 and a half wins there. I got lucky. I got it in before they traded. I'm trying to remember if it was just before they traded Minaya or it was before they also traded. God, I'm like blanking on the other starter they traded.
Long story short, they're fire sailing before April even hit.
Yeah, I got pretty fortunate there. I don't think you're going to be able to find those numbers anymore. But yeah, not a huge fan of the teams in the AL West, honestly. Tons of hype on the Mariners, and I think you were talking about a year away on the Marlins. I think the Mariners should also be in that category, but they're getting much more hype with I think a win total of 84 and a half. They have some very good prospects. Julio Rodriguez, Jared Kelenic last year fell flat on his face, but he was considered to be an elite prospect. But I think that's part of the issue. They're just relying on a lot of young players, a lot of hype on this Matt Brash kid they brought up for the rotation. He struck out a million guys in the minors, but also walked a million. I would guess he's going to struggle more than people expect. Logan Gilbert, another guy who was very good last year, and I think is driving a lot of this hype, but there are other arms. Like I said, I'm not convinced by Matt Brash. Chris Flexen and Marco Gonzalez are pretty mediocre at best. Robbie Ray, obviously very good, but I just never like to bank on anybody coming off a career year like that.
For sure.